Episode of, here we go, live again. This is Ted Coyne with another fun and exciting episode of The Human Side TV, where today I'm going to talk with an author who's also a member of our League of Extraordinary Thinkers, Patti Johnson, author of Make Waves.
Waves.
Which, by the way, so Patti, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let me, just for starters, okay, so the book is phenomenal. We'll get into it in a minute.
Sure.
But the endorsements you have on the back of the book, okay, I'm one of them. There.
Exactly. Yeah, I get it. Some very impressive people on there.
And me. Very impressive people, and Ted Coyne. So thank you for that. Patti is the, let me just introduce you a little bit to the audience. Patti is the CEO of People Results, which she founded in 2004. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And she, at People Results, they advise companies on change in a positive direction.
Yeah,
and so you work mostly with leaders, and your audience is really, or your consulting clients are really a who's who of the Fortune 100.
Thank you. Yes. Great.
Yeah. She's based right in Dallas, and so you may pick up her beautiful accent a little bit as we talk.
Good chance of it, yes.
Yeah. And Patti, this is going live on Monday, the day before your book launches. So tell us a little bit about Make Waves. What is that about?
The book is it's about how anyone can start a change. And so I spent the last 2 years really researching and talking to people who had done it. And so the book started with the convergence of a lot of different ideas, but one of the really interesting things I learned is that anyone, you don't have to be in charge, you don't have to be the CEO, you don't have to have an important title, that a lot of people have started important changes, and it really started with maybe a really small decision. And so the book is really about how you can go about being that person.
Okay, good, and I love that. You know, we have a big thing at Switch and Shift. This is Sean Murphy, my partner. You know, Sean. It's his actual practice. It's wherever you are in the organization, you can lead change, at least for the part that you affect. And you know, I wrote a post a while back called "The Law of the Umbrella," where you can be an umbrella for your team, your department, whatever. You can make change within the. I guess you'd call them an intrapreneur, wouldn't you? So an entrepreneur on the inside.
I use that term a little bit in the book, a couple of places, absolutely too.
Yeah, no, it's a great term. It's very, very helpful. So so Patti, tell us about your. Well, I'm gonna introduce the framework that really caught my attention.
Sure.
So it's think, know, do, which I'm all about the simple things that then when you flesh them out get more complicated, right?
Right.
A little bit more in depth.
Sure.
So it's simple, but it's not simple-minded. It's very deep and powerful. Walk us through think, know, do.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is when I started to write this book, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I was so focused on the do that I almost missed the think part. Because you think about in my world, you know, I spend my time talking about strategy and about process and design and, you know, how you make things happen. And so that's the world I live in and have lived in business. And the more I started taking a step back and really looking at, okay, how did that change really start, and unwinding it back to the beginning, and who was the person that really kind of threw that first pebble and got the momentum started, then I started to realize that, and I did that research, that it wasn't just about what you do, it's about how you think about the world around you. And so I ended up, interestingly enough, when my book was the proposal was still first approved and agreed with the publisher, I didn't even have think in my outline, which is, like, it seems obvious now.
No, do? Or just...
It just had...
Do? Like, how does that work?
It was more around the actions and what you do. And that's when I really realized, I was really, early on, I realized that was so important that I was going to have to go there in this book, even though in a lot of business books you may not. And so I had to rewind it and go back to what's going on in our head, because, you know, I found that's half of it, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Now, give us a good example from the book. Or, you know, all the examples are good. I love the examples. We'll talk about that in a minute. But give us an example in the book of somebody who said, you know, we can do this better or differently, and then how they went through their, you know, bringing change.
Sure. Well, there are a lot of good ones. Some of my favorites were the people who literally were at the beginning of their career. They did not have any knowledge, any experience like us who we could rely on. They were starting with a blank piece of paper. And so one of the examples I really loved was the example of the entrepreneur who started Southern Tide, and Alan Stevenson. He came up with this idea. He wanted to make the best polo shirt anywhere. And he had this vision of what it could be like, what a company could be like around it. And he had no experience in retail, none in production, none in merchandising. He went to Italy, and it kind of inspired him, and he thought, you know, I can see what this could be. And so he set about really educating himself. And he said, he ended up quitting college. He wasn't going to go on to he wasn't going to go to med school. He stopped. And he met literally every day. He said, I probably met 6 or 7 people and talked about the business and learned. And meanwhile, he was also building interest in his business. Right. And went from that to all the way to now an extremely successful business that's, you know, across the country and has grown. And so that's one. I could give you many, but I love the ideas where people really, it wasn't that they already knew how to do it, yet they started anyway. And those are really, to me, it was inspiring. You know, just
okay. So that sounds a little bit though like forget about thinking, just get started.
But you know the interest. But if you back it up, like in Alan's case and Lindsay, and there are plenty of others like we can talk about. When you think the think part of it was that they allowed them to picture what if. They allowed themselves to see connections that in other parts of their life and in their world back to what their idea was, and then they didn't let fear keep them from taking action. Or conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom would say, "What are you doing?" And he said a lot of people around him said that. You know, what are you kidding me? Yet he had enough confidence in himself and his ability to learn and figure it out that he got started. So I think in that example, I think what was going on in his head and the way he thought about it set him up for the actions that he, you know, eventually took.
I love it. Now, so what you're advising is don't go to grad school, don't even finish college.
No, actually, I just want to take it that far, right? But
on the record is how you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, you know, okay. So I'm really huge into. So I'm a person who has never written a line of code in my entire life, but I love the tech community. I just love it. And we'll call him my cousin. He's my second cousin or something. But anyway, so he just graduated from college this last week. Right. And he is majoring in business. He just got his degree. So he's been teaching himself code, like, for instance, code.org. And he's created some really cool apps. And this guy just said, you know, the future, sure, my business degree will be helpful, but it's going to help me make a tech company. Right. So he taught himself. And learning on your own, you know, if your brain works, go out and find that information. I think that's the neatest thing about being alive today is everything's at our fingertips.
Sure. You know, and what you just mentioned, you know, I ended up summarizing what I thought was kind of the DNA of wave makers. Yeah. And one of them was voracious learners. And the people that do just what you just described, that are, you know, the information's out there. I just need to go find it. And like Lois Melbourne, who was the CEO of, they created Acquire, a human resource software company, and that's kind of what her mindset was. You know, I just went out and we talked to everybody, we learned everything, and we knew we could figure it out. She even made a great quote I love, like, I wish that we'd had YouTube, you know, when we were starting out, because what you can learn just from, you know, listening to other people. But that quality you just described is actually very much consistent with wave makers.
I love it. Now, so let's go to another example in your book. So the guy's name is Mark Benton, and I love his quote. So he was with Pepsi, and his quote was, let's see, at least one of the good ones in there was, we were building the plane as we were, no, flying the plane as we were building it. I mangled it, but I just love that. You know, let's go.
Yes. Well, and he had to. His story was one where I talked about sometimes the waves at your doorstep. Sometimes the waves at your doorstep because it's something you didn't want to have happen. His was at his doorstep because of a leadership request, and there was so much more emphasis on research and development and nutrition within PepsiCo that all of a sudden, this was a very important part of his role. So he had to get moving. I mean, there wasn't the option of let me study this for a year and then we'll have a game plan of what we want to do in R&D careers and how we build talent. So, he had that was sort of the best way for him to make progress,
Mm-hmm. And I read in there that he had some resistance. Like he met resistance and he did not hate it.
Correct. Yes, I think. Yes, he was. I had this very eclectic mix of wave maker stories that are in the book, and one of the interesting things about Mark, one of his, was that he viewed resistance as a chance to learn. And one of his favorite quotes that he had said was something like, we don't have to agree on everything, but if we understand each other, we can probably find a way to get something done.
Okay.
And sort of that kind of collaboration mindset, that was also a characteristic of Mark, but of also many of the other people that, their stories that I told.
Yeah, no, I love it, absolutely. So, the thing is, I hate when people say, people tell me, oh, yeah, dissension causes, okay, it can be bad. It can be a negative influence. But dissension can also unearth, okay, wait a minute, there are ideas that I haven't considered. Or there are, as long as somebody isn't just like negative and tearing down, as long as they have legitimate concerns, you can actually make your project or your product much stronger by taking those differing opinions into account. So,
true. And I think one of the things
he's a pretty young guy, too. I didn't mean to talk over you. I just was.
No, we had a little bit
of a guy, so he.
No, we had a little bit of a technology gap, so you're a little pause there. So sorry about that.
Yeah, that's Google Plus.
Yes, welcome to Google Plus. I was going to say that.
I know.
Okay, here we go. Yes, so go back to. Why don't you just restate what you just said, Ted, just to make sure that we didn't lose each other on the transmission here.
Okay, so I think what I was saying was, so he's a young guy, and he was given a project and he needed to get going. Yep. And he took the resistance and kind of built off of it.
Correct.
For another plane. What is it? Planes take off into the wind. I forget whose quote that is. One of the.
That's a good one. That is a good one. Yeah.
So absolutely. It actually makes you more successful.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I also think that resistance. If you're trying to do something by yourself, you're never going to hear it. And that was one of my my learnings was that a lot of the habits that we associate with being a great leader can actually work against you when you're trying to start a change, because it's different, right? A change is not something on your project plan. It's not, a to-do. It's something that you've got to bring other people along with you. Well, if you try to do that by yourself and figure it all out, then that's never going to happen. And the resistance that you're talking about, you're never going to hear it. So, bringing other people in early and having your idea partners and building a community around your idea, that's how it spreads and takes off. And one of my favorite quotes, I think it was Jonathan Morris, said, the kiss of death is to show up and say, good news, everybody, I have all the answers. Yeah. And that one stuck with me because I thought, people don't really say that, but don't we all act that way sometimes? Like we show up in our demeanor or our lack of listening kind of gives that signal.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I'll tell you, the difference between my first business and my third was my first business, I was the man with the plan. I was the guy who had it going on, just listen to me and I'm going to give you your marching orders. And you know what? You either attract followers or the people who you have of talent start acting like followers, because that's all you expect of them. So fortunately, I think I've learned to be a little bit less bossy and a little bit more collaborative, and I think it's made all the difference. Now, Patti, what if you work in an organization, you're someplace in the middle or even the front lines, where you've got a great idea, but you live in more of a culture of fear, where good ideas, wave makers, are smacked down?
Right.
What do you do?
Well, what to do then? Well, I think you've got to decide is, do you belong in that kind of environment?
Okay.
So that's the big one. That's the fundamental one, right? And then the other thing is things can change in organizations. You've got to adjust your style to fit where you work. We all do. And you got to figure out, one of the fundamental questions that I always ask in the book, one of the most basic, obvious questions, but if you always go to, what can I do? You'll usually find an answer, and it may be not as dramatic as you would like. We're impatient people. Sometimes we want change to happen immediately. And some of the people even that I spoke to and that I've seen in my career, they find where they can start and work their way out. And then after you try and experiment a little bit, if you realize nobody wants to change, it's going to stay the same way, then you've got some decisions to make. Should I be in this kind of organization? If you have big ideas and plans, maybe no.
No, I love it. I love it. It's really good advice. And sometimes that means changing whole companies, or sometimes just changing the team, the division, whatever it is within your company.
Absolutely.
Depends on you. But that's the war for talent. I think is whoever treats their talent best wins.
Yeah.
So now, okay. So I have another example that I'd like you to talk about. Fiona Grant. Now you were at Accenture, and you went back to the source for this example. Tell us about Fiona.
Fiona was a really interesting story to me. Actually, I had already left Accenture, but Fiona was the person who really got the whole momentum started for domestic partner benefits at Accenture. And what I found so interesting about her story was that Accenture is a very well thought out, relatively conservative firm. I mean, they don't, it's big, it's global or whatever, and they're going to do their due diligence before they make a decision to introduce a change like that. And at the time, they were one of the early adopters of that change. And so I thought, how interesting that she was able to do that. She didn't do it by herself. She was very clear. They had a committee, but she really got that started. And so I wanted to hear how she did it. And you talked about just a minute ago about somebody who wanted to make a change. They did it step by step by step by step, and they did their homework. And they also really appealed to a bigger strategy of change, which the CEO at the time had said he wanted to change the organization and evolve it forward. And so the time was right for them, but they were very smart in how they did it. And I found her story fascinating, really.
Okay, good. Now, no, I did too, which is why I brought her up. And maybe, certainly, the thing that you pointed out, doing your homework, so that when people come up, if you're in a very, careful company, making sure that you have the answers that are required so that you don't get shot down as somebody who hasn't thought things through.
Right.
Incredibly important. And also couching the pitch you're making in larger, more strategic terms, like you said.
Yes.
All right. Now, Patti, what about say you're just you're not in a Fortune 100 organization. You're heading up a small company.
Sure.
How can you beat the big guys using some of the things inside of this terrific book?
That's a great question. Well, I think a couple of things that come to mind, and that is, I think, experimentation is one that I talk a lot about. Is being able to try some new things, because one thing a small company can do that a big company can't do. A big company doing experiments, it can be a little more complicated. A small company that's much more nimble might try, what is the gap there? What is the thing that we can do as well as anybody, and we can actually get out there and experiment a little bit, and try it. The other thing too, one of the things I talk about in the book is that every organization out there, big and small, I mean, we're all talking about change, we're talking about innovation, transformation. That's the agenda that almost all companies are talking about. And so I always say, companies need wave makers everywhere. Small companies, if you decided, I want to hire wave makers, I want to develop wave makers, and I want a collaborative organization where everybody feels like they play a role, then I think it's much easier, faster for a small CEO to try to figure out, how can I do that and through that could be a way I can really start to compete. There's a million stories, right, about that, and over time, about how the small guy, the Netflix example that caught Blockbuster, 10, 15 years ago, by exactly that, and there's a million more that are much more recent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good point. Kind of, along the David and Goliath model of, which, by the way, folks, a really good book by Malcolm Gladwell, but
great guy.
Is fascinating as Make Waves.
If you read Make Waves, then go read Malcolm Gladwell, right?
No. Okay, let me stop right there. Audience, if you read, I read a book a week. I do. It's my average. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's pretty much my average. And I recommend a lot of books on this show. So far in 2014, there have only been maybe one or two other books that I would put up there with Make Waves. That's how important it is.
Thank you.
We are in a powerful, I wouldn't say it if it weren't true. We are in a powerful time of systemic change. And if you can't make waves, or if you're in an organization that doesn't help you make waves, you're already in trouble.
Yes.
So this book is a great way to kind of get those juices flowing for you, and it's also a great way to get some inspiration of other people who are doing it so you can too, kind of thing. Now, that's enough of the advertisement for your book, Patti. I'm sorry. So let's go back to now. Here's a word that we have been using a lot that we should have really talked about earlier. The word change. Change actually means terror. That's the thing. Everyone, oh yeah, we all need change. Nobody likes change. What's going on there? What's the psychological dynamic where people say they want change, sure, but they resist it?
Yeah, they do. Well, change is a bit of a dirty word, isn't it? Because, it started, I can remember laughing with someone a few years ago that, it started with, the high school boyfriend that said, I think we need to make a change, kind of like that word, from that point on, usually I think we need to change a few things is usually followed by some not good news.
Right. We need to make a change. More specifically, I need to make a change in my girlfriend. Yeah. Or
that could be it. But the one of the motivations for me, you trace back to like for me in writing the book. One of my things I started to think a lot about is in the business community when we talk about change. I found myself sitting in conference rooms. We're talking about change, and up on the wall or in front of us, we would have a project plan. And that's what we talked about. And we talked about change like it was a step-by-step sequential event. And I grew up at Accenture. I love good project plans. So you don't have any debate about the importance of that. But I just started thinking that we were missing so much around the individual side because people are deciding person by person by person. Are they with you? Are they not? In having their role to play. And I don't know. That was one of my early thoughts that I just felt that we were missing that in a very, very big way. At least in business, we were. It was all the leadership and a project plan. It was like that was the recipe, and it takes a lot more than that, I think.
No, for sure. So you are a leader who wants to bring change. How do you win people's buy-in?
Well, I think I'm not sure the question is how do you win their buy-in as much as how do you involve them in the change? Because, again, back to the word change, we feel like that word is a little bit loaded because we feel like it's always happening to us. And so I would say to a leader, if you can find a way that it's not happening to other people. I love the story of Melissa Miller from Alliance Data. She was really very, very masterful, I thought, of she had a strategy, and so she knew what her top 5 were. This is what we're going to go do. But then she found, what can I get people involved in? How can I help them be part of making the decisions that we can all make together? Some of them we can't, right? We have some things we just have to do because that's what the business needs us to do. But she found a way to involve a very large organization in parts of it, not all of it. So I think it's how can you be part of it so that you're not a spectator to it. That's the key. And I think we can do more there than we typically do in a lot of business, in a lot of organizations.
I love your answer. I do. One thing, there's that book that everyone's probably either read or heard about. what is it about moving cheese? Don't move my cheese.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit old, but it takes about 10 minutes to read. But here's the thing: it's not that people don't like moving their own cheese. It's they don't like having their cheese moved. Exactly. They don't like being the passive recipient.
Correct. Yes.
So involving others, I love that. Giving them a role in the change, making it happen with them rather than to them.
That's the key, because I think when the traditional conversation about change has been more, how do you get the buy-in? How do you get the sponsorship? You need those things, of course you do, but the other part is, involve, include. We're so funny because back to what you said a minute ago, throughout the other side of our lives, I mean, there's crowdfunding, there's crowd sharing, there's crowdsourcing, there's we collaborate in such different ways outside of particularly the bigger businesses that at some point that's going to start coming in, and we won't have two lives, the way we can communicate and engage outside versus the way we communicate and engage inside our organizations.
Well, now it sounds to me like you've read the book that I haven't even finished, because we're editing it right now, A World Gone Social. Because you're absolutely right. This whole idea that we can be kind of isolated within the organization, and then outside we're social, open, collaborative. It's got to come in.
It's going to come in. Yeah.
Yeah. And the question is, if you can be the one bringing it in, you will remain relevant.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Right.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about your business. So, People Results.
Yes.
Tell me, what it is you do, how you help clients, what kind of clients you need to work with, or need to work with you.
Sure. Well, I'd say our clients typically, they've got a problem or they've got an opportunity, one of the two. And we are involved in what you talk about at Switch and Shift, the human side of business. That's really what we do on the people side. It's usually helping leaders, organizations be better. We do have areas that we focus in within People Results in terms of talent, organizational effectiveness, leadership development, communications and change, all that. But we usually don't start with clients talking about here's what is in our basket. It's usually more the other way around. What are you trying to do? What are you facing with your business? And then we match up what we know how to do to help them kind of go from point A to B and beyond, basically. So a lot of tailoring, a lot of partnership, a lot of long-standing relationships of clients that we work with.
Cool. Very nice. Very nice. So, Patti, what are your plans? You're going to go on the road. You're going to to promote your book.
Yes. I am doing. I'm doing some things for sure, and in between all client responsibilities and meetings and all of that. But yes, definitely, I'm just now kicking off that whole next phase of getting out there, and it's been fun to get out and to start now and share the book. It's a little bit like you've worked on something and thought about something for so long. It's very interesting and fun to be able to share that with other people and get their perspective, like yours today, of what you thought about it and what stuck with you. So that's really fun. It's a nice place to be.
Awesome. Yeah, no, with you totally. So Patti, if you are watching this and you want to bring this lady in to talk at your next event, you've got great presence. You belong in front of a room. So how do you do that? Do you speak? I know you're CEO of a major corporation, or a thriving corporation. How do you find time? Are you available to speak?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And yes, last week I had a great event, a network of executive women. I was at the Talent Management Association several weeks ago. So yes, I definitely want to get out and speak. And really have been right now. I've been speaking about the different parts of the book, and sometimes it'll be depending on what that audience is, what will resonate with them most. But it's some element of how do you make waves, how do you start change within your organization, and that's really the main theme, with a lot of different angles associated with that as I go out and speak to different groups, for sure.
Gotcha. All right, so what one thing would you like to leave our audience with today that I haven't covered and need to make sure they get across?
I have a lot of things I could think of. One thing I would say, that this is probably one that stuck with me and that I still have to remind myself of, is that you have to start move. You don't have to have all the answers. I mean, those of us that were perfectionists, those of us who think that you've got to have everything, but like you said in your first job that you got to have everything figured out and all planned out, I would say find the first step. Find what can I do toward my wave, toward my change, and move. That's a very entrepreneurial mindset. Of just find I love Bret Hart's quote was motion creates motion, momentum creates momentum. And you can't have it unless you actually get started. So that's kind of what when I go out and speak to people, one of the first questions is, or my last questions is usually, what's that one thing you can do right now to get started on whatever your big idea or the wave that you have in mind.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Patti, I want to thank you very much for coming today.
It's been fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the time flew by like that. Folks, you need to become an expert at bringing change, because the companies that bring change, the leaders that bring change both within an organization and in the market, those are the ones that will continue to thrive. The others are cowering and they'll be left behind. So read the book. You can read some of Patti's work on Switch and Shift. She's part of our League of Extraordinary Thinkers for very good reason. She's a brilliant, brilliant leader herself. So thank you very much, Patti. Thank you, audience.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure entirely. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of The Human Side TV. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right.